Welcome back to Wander and Wonder. Today we're going to talk about the negative side of self-actualization, crystallization of the personality, or individuality truly taking form in the way that it's meant to. This negative side I refer to as something called fragmentation, which can be compared to compartmentalization in reference to our theory of the pillars of self, the different departments of life which make up life as a whole. In terms of fragmentation, we can discuss how one individual may be confused as to the process of individuation which they are going through. Having been presented multiple paths, they begin to live multiple lives in tandem with one another. This is a form of compartmentalization, but their lack of consistency in identity can begin to lead to forms of fragmentation, and ultimately the purpose of all compartments is to come together to build a whole. All pillars hold up one structure, and that structure is the self. But if there is a fragmentation, that is a separation of the structures, we can begin to see multiple personalities arise. And if believed in strong enough, then these multiple personalities can actually manifest themselves as a literal belief in two different individuals. Those individuals which are susceptible to the changes of the identity that the people they find themselves around. Sorry, my language. Trying to put together words. They can begin to perceive themselves as different individuals based on the people they find themselves around. So this concept is about 100, I'd say this theory is about 100 years old. It was written in a book about Arctic expeditions and how two men became a third man, in the process of getting to know one another. This is the way that they perceived themselves in terms of each other, created a type of relationship between them, which would in turn become the identity that both of them would transcend in terms of self when they were together. So this is a concept of group mind, and we could even call it like an insular or separated group mind, a personal, private, encrypted group chat in the realm of the metaphysical. So in terms of fragmentation, we can begin to see that if one acts one way, say for example, like you just have a certain personality when you're around certain people, and you cannot, you feel like this is your authentic self, maybe more than the self that you find yourself when you're around other certain individuals. This is like that old meme, like personality accidentally used personality A in front of friends group B. So I think that something like fragmentation can occur in the self, and ultimately, in my opinion, a journey of healthy self-actualization involves the correction of these fragmentations. That is to say, perhaps a removal of an entire portion of a building rather than the absolute destruction in its entirety, which actually I think requires more work. Like restoration jobs, I feel like maybe a little bit trickier than just building something from scratch, in the way that if you remove a major foundation that is like one of the more major pillars in the structure of the self, there needs to be some scaffolding, or there needs to be like some type of hold, like some type of support in the meantime. And I don't know what that support is in my real life, I could think about it a little bit more, but I think in a lot of ways it could be compared to a crutch for somebody who feels like a limb is broken. And we can go as far with the metaphor as to compare the structure of self as if it's a building. We could take that building and we could say, hey, maybe the structure of self is a man, and maybe there is a broken ankle or a broken wrist, or it would be interesting to examine the different the different pillars of life in terms of a human being, as a human being has different uses for its different limbs, but it may complicate the process. So I think that just using something as basic as just the pillars, these are similar things and they hold up a greater structure or personality. Ultimately, when we look at the pillars theory, we can fixate too much in our own lives, in our own processes of individuation on the individual pillars. But I think that the next level of work really begins in creating the structure of personality which all pillars support. That is an overarching feeling of being at one with oneself and understanding oneself, like in terms of their place in this universe, in this life, in this metaverse, on this plane, whatever you want to say, the role which one feels most appropriately attuned to, and being able to carry this through different departments. Now we begin to draw this structure of self as if it is a map, and we've said before that the map is not the territory. What we have to understand is the piece that we use to navigate this map is that structure that's being held up by all of its columns. We have one piece, and that is the self, the awareness inside, and this feeling of continuity from one moment to the next, from one day into another. And this feeling of self, this personality, is at the whim of its surroundings. And we are also in control somewhat of our surroundings. So we may guide the personality in terms of what we feel is appropriate for us, in terms of what we feel we really deserve, who we really are, what we need to do, our mission, and we can guide it down those paths by use of the will. Understanding the will is as simple as taking a cold shower. You understand that what you're doing will be uncomfortable, and you will be able to press on. You simply will. In my study of Swedish, I found it quite entertaining that if you say that you want something, it's vill ha. But what that means is will have. So you say, I want water. You say, jag vill ha vatten. And it's, I will have water. There is no, like, oh, I want it, but I want, it's like I will have it. Which is very funny. I think of it like in terms of the Viking personality. It's just like of just taking, of just pillaging, plundering. Like, I want it, I will have it. And what you really are doing when you are wanting something is, if you truly want it and you're trying to go get it, you are willing yourself to have it. So by use of this will, we can guide ourselves along paths which are appropriate for our development, our sense of individuality, our sense of self, in terms of its appropriateness for the self that we know, that we are coming to understand on a deeper and deeper level. So we have to remember to be adaptable. Our long-term plans must also be adaptable, and we must really listen to the voice inside ourselves, to these feelings, that may never become words, to figure out where we're headed. Also to pay attention to forms of inspiration. What does what for you in terms of strengthening or weakening the will. There are practices, of course, that one can partake in to strengthen one's resolve. And it would just be as simple as practicing willpower, doing things that you understand are uncomfortable, but doing them just to prove to yourself that you are truly alive, that you are truly in control. And this is really my theory of free will as compared to the chain of chemical reactions in this world that like we can't help the way that we are born a certain way. I feel like all things, that there is a balance between genetic, scientific, what would you call it, like genetic predisposition in terms of like a scientific lens, and our own connection just with ourselves, how we can assert dominance even over the self. We can say this is the way it is, or you could even take a step back and just examine your processes and say, like, do I know that this is right or wrong? And have a sense of inner knowing. It's hard to say on what level other people have a sense of inner knowing. So all I can really go off is my own experience, and there's a way to partake in a guilty pleasure. There is somewhat of a relationship or even a rivalry between pleasure seeking and acts of willpower, strengthening the will. In a lot of ways, I feel like seeking pleasure weakens the will. But there are certain aspects of seeking pleasure which can inspire and strengthen the will. So it's a very interesting relationship. Like all things, I believe if something feels good, there is a way, there is a reason. Whether or not that reason is pathological is another debate. So you would like to depathologize. You want to make sure that all of your choices are coming from a healthy state of mind. You want to make sure that you're doing things actively to strengthen your will, and that this will can affect change in the world. This is one of the concepts of magic, and I like to think of magic as magic in the everyday and not something that is extremely esoteric. It is very real, and it's true that those with a lot of willpower generally get what they want if they're smart enough to understand the process. Some people don't have to go so deep and it comes natural to them, and other people, maybe they've made some mistakes in their lives, or maybe they were predisposed, maybe they weren't awake in terms of like their lives or what they were doing. They were just caught in a constant routine and cycle. One day gained awareness to the life that they were living, and just decided all of a sudden, with like an increased awareness, that they wanted to make a change for the better. That's not to say that anyone who, that everyone needs healing. I think in a lot of ways, healing from healing, very awesome Instagram page. It demonstrates the concept of healing culture and self-improvement culture. So in a lot of ways, we have to be happy with the process, completely understanding that the things that will make us most happy are to find a balance between strengthening the will and enjoying one's life. If one can find a flow in doing anything that is useful, then one will satisfy the higher faculties of the self beyond, training and eating. To find a flow state in something beyond mere survival really is to participate in the splendors of being alive. And I believe that we all deserve to participate in the splendor of being alive. I think that if life is a mundane, droll, boring thing that you find yourself just clawing at the walls just to remain, at your bare minimum, I don't feel like it's really working for you. But there is an awareness, and many people come to this awareness and they say, this has to change. And this is where the process of self-actualization begins. Franz Kafka said, the beginning of understanding is the wish to die. And I think that the conversation that one has with oneself, when one considers death as an option, really as a valid option, I think those conversations glean very interesting conclusions if one remains alive. One begins to assume control, and exercises of control, exercises of will, these are things that strengthen resolve. There's increasing returns over time, and the way that allows one to experience the splendors or even understand what these splendors are is nothing short of beautiful. So yes, fragmentation is something we wish to avoid. We want one overarching personality. And we want this personality to be continuous through all aspects of our life. We could even call this the process of self-integration. And I don't know why it's so important. It just seems like you don't want to be multiple people. So there has to be a balance somewhat in the ease of transformation from one set of whereabouts to another. Obviously, we can't expect to act this exact same way at all times, because we are subject to our muses, we are subject to our sensory experience, we are subject to all forms of inspiration or social interaction. In a lot of ways, we don't acknowledge the ways that we can affect reality simply with our voice, simply with our actions, the way that we can inspire others. That's just like one thing, just like hitting the gym or working hard to make ends meet. Even actions as simple as that can inspire others to try to reach greater heights. I know I personally sometimes look at other people in my age group and I am like, shit, I am left behind, or I am feeling increasingly left behind over time, not having found like a quote unquote long game plan to continue like my family line, and not having a stable form of housing, income, or land to grow leads me to believe that in order to acquire these things, what I must do is undergo a process of strengthening my own resolve and will, and this really will begin a process of self-actualization, in which I hopefully find myself living my dreams and my goals. It's really nice to have something to aspire to in life. And if nothing else, if life really were for nothing else than to aspire to reach great heights and to experience splendor, I don't understand why anyone wouldn't at least give it a shot. And anyone that has found themselves in a position of like extreme depression, suicidal thoughts, etc., I could only hope that you're smart enough to see some sort of the reckless abandon of suicide applied to your life, insofar as you could go ahead and blow up your whole life before you would actually commit the act. We would hope, I would hope rather that you find deeper meaning in your madness, or like your absolute abandon, and at least experience some of the splendor that there is on this planet. Undeniable beauty, a true aesthetics of creation. I'm sure our studies done all over just simply walking down a forest path, the way that it makes the mind work, the way that it makes the body feel. So I don't really understand why anyone wouldn't just drop it all and start hitchhiking before they commit suicide. Probably getting demonetized for saying the word. Whatever, it wasn't monetized anyways. Don't care. Anyways, breaking routine patterns of thought is an important milestone in coming to the realization that certain negative behaviors, certain negative aspects of your life may need to change. There obviously is there's only a responsibility in oneself, and there is something to be said as well as loyalty to one's family, one's people, their friends, their like anyone who is actually in the direct community of the individual. So I do feel like some people have to do a little bit of soul searching elsewhere as individuals, completely ungrounded and separated from their native land. That is to say, like a spirit journey or whatever. And maybe every once in a while the individual should allow themselves to take such a journey in their own lives, just to put everything in perspective. But I do think that on the other hand, there is a really beautiful thing in building a long-term community, not just moving from place to place all the time. There's a song about this called The Wild Rover. It's performed very well by the band The Corries, Corries, and in a lot of ways it does describe the process of coming home or wanting to set down a root somewhere. It's really quite difficult to integrate yourself into a new community, so be thankful for what you have at home, and don't ever let other people be to blame for any type of behavior. Like, always obviously take accountability and try to move forward as much as you can in your own life to accomplish the things that you want to accomplish. Obviously, like, we understand that we have certain responsibilities as individuals to uphold a certain a certain state of living, like quality of life, and we must fulfill those responsibilities at the same. And if we could integrate our responsibilities with our passions, we may find ourselves in a very healthy process of self-actualization, or we might find ourselves in a position of destroying that which we love in terms of our passions. So I think there's a lot of thought, a lot of work to be done. Should probably start a journal again and really try to organize things outside of just linear speech. Anyways, that's it for today.